there's also a great deal of disappointment in the way the US has conducted itself on the international stage over the last few years. How much of this changes if the poll suggests that Joe Biden wins next month? Are we back then to a world where the US conducts itself as a responsible leader, where US foreign policy is led by experienced diplomats, where the US seeks, as you mentioned before, to build international consensus, to build international institutions, not destroy them? Is there a structural problem? Is there a deeper problem? Or how much does that change if Trump is not reelected?
Great question. Look, there's no question, there's no doubt that Joe Biden will represent a kind of return to the basic norms of American foreign policy and diplomacy that have governed the country since 1945. Trump really is an anomaly. Trump is a rejection of 75 years of American foreign policy that has looked at America as being the leader of a world, the creator of an international system, willing to bear certain burdens and pay certain prices, and that believed that at the end of the day, that this kind of interconnected world with an engaged America at the helm was going to result in greater peace, greater stability, and ultimately greater freedom and prosperity. Trump has a much more transactional relationship with the world. I mean, Trump is sort of like the landlord who just wants to figure out, are you paying me enough rent? And if the Germans are not paying enough rent, that's all he's obsessed with. But we can't just go back to normal because the world has changed. As I say in the book, we really have entered a bipolar world. And you can see the mark of bipolarity by the fact that US and China are now just leagues ahead of every other country in the world. So the US is the largest economy in the world. China is the second largest economy in the world. But China is then larger than the next 4 economies put together. So you take Japan, Germany, Britain, I think it's France, and you put them all together, and the Chinese economy is larger than that. Same is true in military terms. So we have now entered that bipolar world where there are 2 powers above all the rest. What does that world look like? How do we navigate it? How does every country fit in and navigate its own realm in this? The US has not figured it out, has not really, I think, confronted that, and that would be the great challenge for a Biden administration. It is, of course, also the great strategic challenge for India. India has not thought seriously about strategy, in my view, for a long time, and with a few exceptions, momentarily Manmohan Singh, who was very smart, much wiser on foreign policy than people realize when he initiated the nuclear deal with the US. Manmohan Singh had it, but other than that, you really have had since Jawaharlal Nehru formulated the principles of non-alignment in the 1950s, you have not had a creative, strategic process of thinking through what India's interests are in the world, what the world looks like. And as a result, Indian foreign policy is essentially reactive. It becomes a series of photo ops about visiting leaders. There are a few impulses here and there. When Prime Minister Modi says he wants his foreign policy to be multi-aligned, it's frankly a kind of meaningless concept. It is to have a strategy is to choose. And what saying that you're multi-aligned means is you refuse to choose. You refuse to try to figure out what the world looks like and what direction India should be pointing in.